under the same sky. The restaurant was almost empty that autumn afternoon, with the golden leaves falling softly from the trees, pushed by the breeze that slipped through the window. The aroma of freshly made food mingled with the tranquil sound of rain hitting the window panes. At one of the tables near the window, Julia was immersed in her book. An old story. He loved to read it again and again, as if by doing so he could discover something new each time. His wineglass was half full, but he didn't care. He was too focused on the words, impressed on the pages as to realize the passage of time. It had been a long day, and his mind was still full of thoughts about work and the tensions of daily life. He decided to go to the restaurant to relax, a small refuge that allowed him to escape the stress for a moment. He never imagined that that familiar place would be the scene where his life was going to change. R, do you mind if I sit here? A man's voice broke her concentration. Julia looked up and saw a young man with dark hair and a light smile, holding a glass of wine. Man, looking at her kindly, his expression reflected a certain shyness, but also a genuine curiosity. Julia smiled, closing her book slowly. Of course. Go ahead, she replied, pointing to the seat. He faced her. The man sat down and began to take his mobile phone out of his pocket. For a few moments, both shared the silence. While he seemed to get lost in the screens of he and she resumed her reading. However, something in the atmosphere of the place connected them, a pleasant stillness that made time vanish without anyone noticing. As the sound of the keys of his cell phone mixed with the soft rain outside, Julia began to observe the man, not with curiosity, but with the naturalness of someone who feels comfortable in his space. Sharing it with a stranger without it being uncomfortable. A few minutes later, he looked up and looked at her, as if he were looking for something. What are you reading? He asked with a smile. Julia him. She looked up, a little surprised. It wasn't common for someone to be interested in what she was reading at a time like that. It's a Victorian-era novel, she replied, with a shy smile. It's one of those books that I like to read when I need to escape. Escape from what? He asked, leaning forward slightly, showing genuine interest. Julia thought about it for a moment, but not to avoid feeling comfortable with him. There was something about his presence that made her relax, as if, in that small space of time, nothing really mattered. She didn't have to worry about seeming perfect, to have a witty conversation. They were just there, two people sharing the same space. Escaping from routines, I suppose. Sometimes life seems to repeat itself too much. Work, 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 Ajo. And sometimes there is not much more. People come and go from your life, but it is not always easy to find something that makes you feel that you are really worth it. The man looked at her for a moment, as if what he had said resonated with him somehow. Then his expression softened. I'm a little like that too. Sometimes work, expectations, all those duties seem to cloud things important. But I also believe that life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. Julia looked at him, intrigued by his perspective. There was something in his gaze that denoted a deep understanding. Ofunda, as if her words were not just an empty phrase, but something she really felt. That's what I'm trying to find, she said, smiling slightly. Something worthwhile. Something that, I feel like I'm in the right place. Because sometimes, you don't even know if what you're doing is taking you where you really want to be. The man nodded slowly, as if he understood perfectly what she was saying. Her response was not immediate, but when she spoke, her voice was warm, calm. I think that when things don't go as you expect, it's because perhaps something still, it has not arrived. And when it arrives, you will know that it is what was destined to happen. Julia looked at him, surprised by the serenity of his words. She didn't know why, but somehow she felt that I was talking to someone who really understood what it meant to fight for something intangible, something that couldn't be touched, but that was vital to oneself. My name is Julia, by the way, she said, breaking the silence that had been created between them. I am Marcos, he replied, smiling. Pleased to meet you. In the days that followed, Julia and Marcos began to meet regularly. In the same restaurant, sometimes they only greeted each other and continued with their tasks. But other times, like that afternoon, they shared long conversations about everything and nothing. They talked about the moments of their lives, their insecurities, their dreams, and frustrations. Although at first it seemed that it was only a casual friendship, something more began to grow between them. For Julia, Marcos represented calmness, something she had been searching for a long time. With him, she felt she could be herself, without needing to hide her emotions behind a facade of perfection. At tea, through the conversations, Julia began to realize that life does not always follow the path we plan, and that sometimes the real challenge is having the courage to accept the unexpected. That afternoon, while both sat in front of their pasta dishes and a glass of wine, the atmosphere seemed warmer than usual. Marcos, as always, seemed comfortable with her presence, but there was something different in the air. A silence full of meaning surrounded them, and without either of them being able to avoid it, their gazes crossed in a deeper way than ever before. "Do you know," said Marcos, breaking the silence, "I realize that what I like most about spending time with you is not just the conversations. It's how you make me feel as if, in a world full of chaos, I could be myself without fear." "Do?" Julia looked at him, a lump forming in her throat at his words. There was something so honest in his voice that it stirred something inside her. Suddenly, everything seemed to fit. The afternoons at the restaurant, the effortless conversations, the feeling that something more was being born between them. "I feel that way too," she said, her voice soft but sure. "It's strange, but in a way I feel like if he had found something he was looking for without knowing it." Marcos smiled, and this time it was a smile that not only reflected sympathy, but a deeper connection. One of those smiles that left. Of course, both of them knew exactly what they felt, although they hadn't said it out loud yet. "Would you like to go out with me?" Marcos asked, with a sincere look. Julia looked him in the eyes, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. I knew that that question not only marked the beginning of a new relationship, but also an important step towards something bigger, towards the possibility of love, and to be loved unconditionally. With a shy but confident smile, she answered, "Yes, I would like that very much." And so, under the same sky, without haste, with patience, and with the hope that simple moments, ese de la vida, pueden ser los más extraordinarios, began his story. A story that, despite its imperfections, promised to be real and authentic, like everything worthwhile. End